In a wealthy New York City neighborhood, police launched an investigation into a chilling double murder. The victims, two small children, left the community in stunned disbelief. The mother's anguished screams pierced the silence, caught by a neighbor who quickly alerted authorities. Arriving at the scene, officers discovered a tragic tableau. The children were lifeless. This haunting case unfolded on Manhattan's Upper West Side. The setting was a 10-story apartment building on West 75th Street, just a block from Central Park. On October 25, 2012, a woman named Charlotte shared a brief elevator ride with two unsuspecting children. Those children lived in the building alongside their devoted nanny. Charlotte recalled telling the little girl how beautiful she was, receiving the brightest smile in return. At that moment, nothing seemed amiss with either the nanny or the children. But less than an hour later, around 5:30 p.m., Charlotte returned to the elevator and was shaken by a primal scream echoing through the building. She described it as pure terror, unlike anything she had ever heard. Exiting the elevator, Charlotte spotted a woman standing on the mezzanine screaming in panic. Other neighbors soon gathered, drawn by the chilling cries. Meanwhile, Marina Crimm had taken her 3-year-old daughter, Inez, known as Nessie, to a swimming lesson. Her other children, 6-year-old Lucia, affectionately called Lulu, and 2-year-old Leo, remained at home with their 50-year-old nanny, Yoselyn Ortega. Marina had planned to reunite with Yoselyn later that day, but neither the nanny nor the children were present. Growing increasingly worried, Marina's texts went unanswered. Desperation crept in as she messaged, asking where they were. Taking Nessie, Marina hurried back home. Upon entering their darkened apartment, an unsettling silence filled the air. Seeking answers, she descended to speak with the doorman, who assured her they had not yet left. Returning upstairs, Marina searched the apartment. She noticed her daughter's bag and her son's stroller untouched in their usual spots. Clutching Nessie's hand tightly, she moved from room to room, dread mounting. At the bathroom door, a faint light spilled out. Inside, Marina discovered the unthinkable, the bodies of Leo and Lucia resting in the tub. Lucia had suffered 30 stab wounds, Leo 5. Their nanny, Yoselyn, locked eyes with Marina before seizing a large knife and turning it on herself. From the same floor, neighbor Rima Starr heard the horrific screams, recalling cries accusing someone of slitting a throat. The doorman, Glenn Luddy, acted swiftly, dialing 911 as agonized screams echoed through the building. Police soon arrived at the apartment, confronting a scene from a nightmare. In the lobby, Marina Crimm was found frantic and inconsolable, holding Nessie close. A neighbor described her as hysterical, overwhelmed by grief. What awaited the first responders was beyond comprehension. Blood smeared the bathroom floor and walls, a grotesque testament to violence. 2 bloodied knives were recovered, one lying in the hallway, the other in the sink. The scene was one of utter carnage. Amid the chaos, Marina's husband, Kevin Crimm, was returning home from a business trip. As senior vice president at CNBC Digital, he was en route to JFK Airport when 2 plainclothes officers intercepted him. His phone revealed a voicemail from Marina, filled only with screams. The officers delivered the grim news. Kevin and his wife, Marina, were in their late 30s and the parents of 3 young children. Originally from California, the family had relocated from San Francisco to New York. Marina, once a kindergarten teacher with degrees in fine arts and education, had left her career to focus on motherhood. To ease the burden, they had employed Yoselyn Ortega, their 50-year-old nanny, who had served the family faithfully for 2 years. Yoselyn was promptly arrested and removed from the scene on a stretcher. Critically wounded from self-inflicted knife injuries, she was rushed to New York Presbyterian Hospital for emergency treatment. Marina and her surviving daughter, Nessie, were escorted from the building by police, concealed beneath a white sheet to shield them from the media. Marina was hospitalized for trauma, while Leo and Lucia were rushed to St. Luke's Roosevelt Hospital. Tragically, both children were pronounced dead. The investigation quickly became a double murder case, leaving the city to ask how such horror could unfold. The family, once close-knit, was shattered. Neighbors and strangers alike gathered silently, struggling to comprehend the pain. How does one make sense of a tragedy where the children's beloved nanny, affectionately called Josie, became the suspect? Born in Santiago de los Caballeros, Dominican Republic, Yoselyn Ortega had become a naturalized U.S. citizen. She lived in Manhattan with her sister, niece, and son. Her sister had introduced her to the Crimm family. Also a nanny, Yoselyn's sister worked for a family whose child attended the same preschool as Lucia. It was during a ballet class that Yoselyn first approached Marina, inquiring if she needed childcare. Marina admitted they had no nanny yet, as the Crimm family had recently moved to New York and were considering hiring help. They requested references on Yoselyn, which initially appeared favorable. However, it would later emerge that a relative had fabricated a reference, claiming Yoselyn had cared for a child who did not exist. Marina maintained a family blog, chronicling daily life and the children's adventures. Yoselyn was woven into the fabric of the family, trusted and accepted. Just months before the tragedy, in February 2012, the Crimm family traveled to the Dominican Republic for 9 days, staying partly with Yoselyn's sister. Marina wrote on February 18th that they had spent half their time at Josie's sister's home in Santiago, and the remainder at Balcones de Atlanta in Las Terrenas, deepening the bonds between families. The setting was a condo-style hotel, a weekend retreat for the real housewives of the Dominican Republic and their families. It was a place of warmth and laughter. Marina Crimm and Kevin Crimm, devoted parents, had met Yoselyn Ortega's family, and the Dominican Republic itself was a backdrop of beauty and life. Their love for their children was evident in every public gesture. On September 30th, Marina shared a photo of their son, celebrating his 2nd birthday. She cherished the quiet moments after dropping their daughters at school, those precious hours alone with little Leo. She called it cheesy, yet her adoration was undeniable. But beneath this picture of family joy, investigators faced a grim question early that morning. What could drive a trusted caregiver, paid to protect, to turn violently against the very children in her care? On the bathroom floor lay Yoselyn Ortega, the nanny, her own throat marked by self-inflicted wounds. Herbert Klein, a neighbor, was jolted awake by Marina's desperate screams echoing through the building. He recalled her anguished cries, uttering that her life was destroyed and that she had lost her children. As darkness fell, police removed Ortega from the scene, a sheet covering her head and that of her surviving child. At 50 years old, Ortega survived the throat injuries. By morning, authorities confirmed she was in critical but stable condition at a nearby hospital. Her wound, though severe, had miraculously missed major arteries. Initially sedated and intubated, she was kept under police watch. 2 days later, she emerged from coma, unable to speak, restrained to her hospital bed. Her communication was limited to mouthing words and pointing to letters. She revealed the heavy burden she carried, having to do everything for the children, beyond her role as babysitter, including 5 hours of weekly cleaning demanded by the family. Investigators delved deeper into Ortega's life, seeking motives behind this shocking betrayal. Months earlier, she had relocated her 17-year-old son from the Dominican Republic to New York, hoping to enroll him in private school. Her brother had agreed to cover the first year's fees, with Ortega responsible for subsequent payments. She had separated from her son's father in 2001, with no reported conflicts between them. Her ex-partner expressed shock at the tragedy, confessing he never imagined the turmoil concealed within Ortega. A family source described the incident as unfathomable, noting Ortega's deep affection for the children, unable to comprehend what could have driven her to such violence. Yet those close to her sensed something amiss. Her niece recalled Ortega's recent nervous and unsettled behavior. A neighbor, who had only met Ortega days before, described her as silent and withdrawn, staring ahead without engagement. Others in Hamilton Heights observed a troubling change: weight loss, visible anxiety, and agitation. After losing her Bronx apartment, Ortega had recently returned to Hamilton Heights, supplementing her income by selling personal items. In interviews, Ortega admitted financial strain. According to reports, she became irate when asked by the Crimm family to perform household chores, asserting she was paid solely to care for the children. A source revealed she demanded additional compensation for cleaning, declaring she was not hired for such duties. The day before the murders, Faustino Cornell, an acquaintance since childhood, recounted how Ortega asked his wife to take her to a psychologist, a request she honored. As sedation lifted, Ortega slipped into a catatonic state. Gradually, she responded with subtle eye movements and nods. The more she grasped the gravity of her actions, the more silent she became. Authorities confirmed that while still hospitalized, Ortega was formally charged with murder. The nanny who had stabbed 2 children in her care was now indicted. Mark Hoffman, CEO of CNBC where Kevin Crimm worked, expressed the profound sorrow felt for the family, acknowledging the immeasurable pain engulfing Kevin, Marina, and their loved ones. Family members from the West Coast flew to New York to offer support. Kevin's father revealed the family had not returned to the apartment, unsure if they ever could. He described Kevin's struggle to stay strong for his wife and daughter, sharing that Kevin texted his own parents to say he couldn't speak with them yet, fearing he would fall apart. Their grief was a nightmare beyond imagining. The children's grandmother, Karen Grimm, admitted she had no understanding of what triggered Ortega's actions. Facing 2 counts of first-degree murder and 2 counts of second-degree murder, Ortega pleaded not guilty by reason of insanity. Prosecutors argued she was fully aware, describing the killings as intentional and savage, fueled by resentment toward Marina Crimm. They maintained no credible evidence, supported claims of mental illness during Ortega's initial court appearance. Defense attorneys requested additional time to examine thousands of pages of medical records. Ortega was held without bail in the psychiatric ward at Elmhurst Hospital Center as officials assessed her fitness for trial. Meanwhile, a memorial was organized at Avery Fisher Hall in Manhattan to honor the lost children. In a heartfelt statement, Marina and Kevin thanked supporters for their overwhelming kindness. They remembered Lucia and Leo as 2 of their 3 best friends, expressing the deep void left in their lives. They spoke of their surviving daughter, Inez Crimm, whose strength was bolstered by the community's support. A gathering of family and friends celebrated the beautiful lives of Lucia and Leo. The Crimms emphasized the importance of remembering their children as sweet, creative, and playful. To honor them, they established the Lulu and Leo Fund, dedicated to arts and science education for young children in schools and community institutions. Lucia's art classes had been a source of joy and enrichment. The fund aims to provide other children with similar transformative experiences. In October 2013, amid tragedy, a fragile ray of hope emerged for the family. The family welcomed a baby boy, Felix, during a season heavy with emotion. The fall brought with it the poignant anniversary of Leo's birthday, alongside the painful remembrance of Lulu and Leo's deaths, a truth the family openly shared on Facebook. Amid the sorrow, there was news of hope. Marina Crimm was pregnant again, expecting a baby boy in late January. Young Inez Crimm eagerly embraced her new role as Queen Bee of the family, while little Felix, turning 2 that weekend, was excited to trade his crib for a bunk bed shared with his sister. Each new child seemed to weave a closer bond to the memories of Lulu and Leo, whose presence lingered in the siblings' expressions and mannerisms. Soon, Marina would give birth to another son, Linus. Meanwhile, Yoselyn Ortega was declared fit to stand trial. A court-ordered psychiatric evaluation confirmed Ortega's ability to participate in her defense. She faced Judge Gregory Caro, who remarked during jury selection that anyone unmoved by this trial should check their pulse. Ortega had refused a plea deal offering 30 years to life in exchange for guilty pleas to 2 murder charges. The preceding years had been consumed by intense pre-trial battles focused on her mental state. In New York, the bar for a successful insanity defense is exceptionally high and rare. Ortega's defense team faced the daunting task of proving she did not know her actions were wrong and lacked understanding of their consequences. The prosecution, however, made it clear they rejected any claim of insanity. The trial of the nanny accused of murdering 2 young children in her care commenced in Lower Manhattan. Prosecutors revealed that in 2012, Yoselyn Ortega stabbed 6-year-old Lucia Crimm and 2-year-old Leo Crimm inside their Upper West Side apartment. At the courthouse, reporter Hazel Sanchez observed Ortega sitting motionless as the grim details unfolded. Marina Crimm opened the bathroom door to a nightmare. The bloodied, lifeless bodies of her daughter and son stacked in the bathtub. Their eyes were open, coated in blood, staring blankly ahead. Between her and her dead children stood the defendant, holding one of the knives used in the brutal attack. These facts stood undisputed. On October 25, 2012, Yoselyn Ortega intentionally murdered Lulu and Leo Crimm. The evidence would prove beyond a reasonable doubt that she knew exactly what she was doing and understood that killing them was wrong. The prosecution emphasized that Ortega's awareness and intent were clear on that day. She acted with full knowledge of her deeds and their moral weight. The defense urged the court to consider whether Ortega had the capacity to comprehend, perceive, and confront her mental illness on that fateful day. They questioned whether she possessed the necessary mental state to object to her actions. Judge Caro acknowledged the defense's request respectfully. preparing to instruct the jury on the complex legal standards governing insanity defenses rooted in democratic legal traditions. He reminded the court of the balance between holding offenders accountable and recognizing the role mental illness can play. The jury would be guided strictly by the law in their deliberations. The courtroom prepared for a battle over intent. The prosecution vowed to prove that a deliberate, intentional wrong had been committed on October 25, 2012. The critical question at hand: was Ortega capable of forming intent to kill on that day? The prosecution challenged the defense's claim that Ortega's actions were driven by psychosis. They argued the acts were not the product of delusions, hallucinations, or severe mental illness, but intentional violence. The scene was set for a harrowing examination of Ortega's state of mind. According to the prosecution, Ortega viciously and violently slaughtered the Crimm children. The defense countered that she was a victim herself, suffering from untreated mental illness dating back to her adolescence. They presented evidence of Ortega's long-standing history of hearing voices and disconnecting from reality since she was 16. The defense emphasized the absence of motive, a hallmark of insanity. Yet the prosecution dismissed this, asserting that Ortega's actions were calculated, driven by resentment over her employers demanding more from her. Assistant District Attorney Courtney Groves revealed that Ortega had taken 2 knives from the kitchen prior to launching the brutal attack in the bathroom. She deliberately slit the children's throats to silence their screams. Groves detailed how Lucia was aware of the attack, evidenced by the 30 distinct stab and slash wounds consistent with a desperate struggle to survive. The injuries were so severe that first responders initially suspected decapitation. Leo was drenched in blood to the point that the officer removing him from the tub feared he might slip from his grasp. The prosecution highlighted that Ortega had planned the murders with chilling precision, choosing a moment when she knew she would not be interrupted. This calculated timing coincided with a psychologist appointment, the only mental health contact Ortega had in 30 years, underscoring her isolation. The district attorney recounted testimony from Ortega's therapist, Dr. Thomas Caffrey, who described sessions where Ortega spoke of guilt, anxiety, and depression. However, Dr. Caffrey noted no indications that Ortega intended harm to herself or others. There was no evidence suggesting hallucinations or delusions. Among the prosecution's witnesses was Marina Crimm. Without prompting, her voice trembling and body shaking, she confronted the court with raw emotion, branding Ortega a liar. Marina recounted the horror as if reliving it. Walking down the hall to see light beneath the bathroom door, knowing her daughter was dead, lying in the bathtub with eyes wide open, blood covering her and her son. She described seeing Ortega, blood-soaked and wide-eyed, standing between her and her children. The only words Marina could muster in that moment were a desperate challenge to the woman who had destroyed her family. Desperation filled the air as little Lucia Crimm, fighting for her life, resisted with every ounce of strength she had. Prosecutors revealed that in response to her desperate defense, the assailant unleashed a brutal assault, inflicting nearly 30 stab and slash wounds across Lucia's body, including her neck. Marina Crimm, shattered by the loss of her daughter, described the horror in haunting terms, calling Lucia her best friend taken away. As she exited the courtroom, Marina confronted Yoselyn Ortega with raw fury, branding her as repulsive and vile. Under probing questions from the defense, Marina Crimm struggled with grief, unable to recall her exact words to the police in the aftermath. She revealed a chilling encounter weeks before the tragedy, when she caught Ortega casting a cold, malevolent glare her way, an expression Marina described as pure evil. The courtroom bore witness to jurors overcome with emotion, tears flowing freely after hearing Marina's heart-wrenching testimony. All the while, Ortega sat impassive, her face unreadable as the weight of the accusations pressed down. The atmosphere shifted from sorrow to outrage on the trial's second day. Marina Crimm returned to the stand, at times addressing Ortega directly, branding her with blunt condemnation, calling her evil, a word heavy with grief and accusation. Reporter Rob Nelson captured the harrowing scene as Marina's anguish spilled over in the courtroom. In a moment of raw emotion, Marina demanded release from the ordeal, shouting accusations of evil at Ortega before storming out, her grief palpable. For the jurors, the ordeal was almost unbearable. They bore witness to the grim details of the children's injuries and were confronted with graphic crime scene photographs. One juror trembled uncontrollably, while another asked to be excused, unable to maintain impartiality. Throughout the presentation of these chilling images, Ortega remained detached, her gaze fixed forward, refusing to meet the horrors displayed. At times, her behavior baffled observers. She laughed during testimony and showed disdain with eye rolls and headshakes. The defense portrayed Ortega as a long-time sufferer of psychosis and hallucinations, a woman who sought refuge in faith rather than medical help. After the murders, she confessed to a psychiatrist that she felt invaded by the devil and compelled by voices urging her to kill. Mental illness, the defense argued, can creep unnoticed, hiding beneath the surface. However, the prosecution countered sharply, citing Ortega's calculated actions that day, leaving her phone behind and hanging critical documents on her apartment door as signs of a deliberate plan. The prosecution painted a chilling picture. Ortega intended to murder the Crimm children before ending her own life. They drew attention to her son's testimony, where he shockingly described the killings as an accident. The prosecutor challenged the son's claim, emphasizing the tragic reality that 2 children had lost their lives. Contrary to claims of demonic possession, the son spoke of a mother who seemed merely sad and depressed that day, bidding him farewell as usual. On the night of the murders, a mysterious call was made from Ortega's phone, now missing, during which a man's voice pleaded for help before hanging up. The line was disconnected shortly thereafter, deepening the mystery surrounding her motives. Though no clear motive emerged, prosecutors suggested a toxic mix of jealousy and financial hardship might have driven Ortega to violence. She was struggling, unable to afford her son's private school, having lost her apartment, and reliant on her sister's home. Yet, the prosecution admitted these motives were speculative. They acknowledged that sometimes no satisfactory explanation exists for such horrific acts. Still, they insisted, lack of motive does not absolve responsibility for the brutal murders of Lucia and Leo Crimm. The courtroom fell silent as Kevin Crimm took the stand, his testimony breaking hearts. He recounted the final moments with his children, lying pale and still in hospital beds, their delicate features hauntingly preserved despite the trauma. With visible disgust, Kevin sat mere feet from Ortega, the woman he once trusted. The defense maintained Ortega's severe psychosis and depression drove her actions, claiming she heard voices commanding her to kill. Yet, a video played during the trial contradicted these claims. In it, Ortega denied ever hearing or seeing Satan. The prosecution seized on this, questioning her narrative of possession and exposing contradictions in her story. The jury prepared to deliberate in Lower Manhattan amidst intense public scrutiny and media attention. The trial had lasted 2 months, each moment laden with tension and heartbreak. Ortega was convicted on 2 counts of second-degree murder and 2 counts of first-degree murder. Kevin Crimm, seated in the courtroom's front row, shared the moment with alternate jurors who had returned to hear the decision. In a chilling claim, Yoselyn Ortega insisted that voices commanded her to kill the children. Yet, a video played during the trial shattered this defense. In it, Ortega denied ever hearing or seeing Satan. When pressed about feeling possessed by the devil, she offered no confirmation. Prosecutors painted a picture of rage fueling Ortega's actions, suggesting she harbored deep anger toward Marina Crimm, the children's mother, accusing her of overworking the nanny. Notably, Marina Crimm was absent from the courtroom that day. After a grueling 2-month trial, the case gripped public attention and the media alike. Everyone awaited the jury's decision, which was slated to begin the following day in Lower Manhattan. The tension was palpable. When the jury retired to deliberate, the atmosphere was thick with anticipation. After 2 days, they returned with a verdict. The nanny stood convicted of murder in the savage stabbing deaths of 2 young siblings under her care. Yoselyn Ortega was found guilty of killing 6-year-old Lucia Crimm. Her 2-year-old brother, Leo Crimm, was also a victim. The jury faced the critical task of deciding guilt, innocence, or not guilty by reason of mental disease or defect. Ortega remained nearly motionless as 4 guilty verdicts were read aloud, save for a single moment when she wiped a tear from her cheek. The jury convicted Yoselyn Ortega on 2 counts of second-degree murder and 2 counts of first-degree murder. Kevin Crimm, the victim's father, sat in the front row, flanked by alternate jurors who had been dismissed but returned to hear the verdict. The profound effect of the trial on the jury was clear. One juror admitted that opinions had been divided from the start and remained so until the final decision was reached. Speaking for the group, the juror conveyed a sense of relief and conviction about their verdict. They acknowledged the weight of their responsibility, emphasizing the care taken to ensure fairness amidst the harrowing facts. The decision was neither easy nor taken lightly. The deliberation was marked by raised voices and tears, revealing the emotional toll this case exacted on those tasked with delivering justice. Ultimately, the jury felt confident that they had thoroughly addressed every issue. They weighed all evidence carefully, coming to a verdict after finding Yoselyn Ortega guilty. Kevin Crimm, overwhelmed with gratitude, reached out to embrace as many jurors as he could. He recognized the hellish ordeal they endured, sitting through the harrowing trial. This journey had tested the family profoundly. Despite the pain, the Crimm family's love for New York remained steadfast. Lulu and Leo had cherished this city. Now, the moment arrived for Yoselyn Ortega's sentencing. The prosecution laid out the charges with unwavering clarity. She had murdered 2 innocent children. The killings were deliberate, committed with full awareness of their terrible consequences. The call for justice was clear: justice for Lulu, justice for Leo, justice for Marina and Kevin, and justice for Inez. Justice extended beyond the immediate family, to the people of New York State and all who loved the Crimm family. It was a demand to confront the brutal violence inflicted on those children and their parents. The jury found no credible signs of serious mental illness. They rejected Yoselyn Ortega's defense, concluding she acted with full awareness. This verdict shaped the sentencing that would follow. At the hearing, Kevin Crimm unleashed a searing indictment. He labeled Ortega an evil and dangerously narcissistic figure, utterly devoid of remorse or responsibility. His words cut through the courtroom silence. He implored the judge to apply the law with unwavering resolve, trusting the judge would not need his plea after all that had been revealed. Yet he insisted. The defendant must never walk free again. Kevin made clear that Ortega did not understand responsibility or remorse and should be denied any hope of freedom. He envisioned a future where she would fade into obscurity, forgotten, while Lulu and Leo's memory burned bright. The siblings of Lulu and Leo, along with a vast circle of family and friends, many who never met the victims, would carry their inspiring legacies forward, refusing to let them be erased. Marina Crimm shared her own poignant reflection. In her best moments, she felt Lulu's spirit guiding her. In her darkest hours, she asked what Lulu and Leo would choose to do, a beacon of hope shining through the grief. Marina's words were a source of strength and direction, the finest guidance anyone could hope for. Through a translator, she told the court in Spanish that despite the pain, she wished no one else to endure what she had suffered. She described Lulu and Leo as powerful forces, 2 stars forever lighting the way forward. Her sorrow was profound, yet she remained steadfast in her resolve to honor their memory and keep their spirit alive. Yoselyn Ortega's lawyer pleaded for mercy, requesting protective custody and access to mental health care. The defense sought leniency, acknowledging the loss but hoping for a chance at parole. The judge, Gregory Caro, firmly disagreed. He condemned Ortega's actions as pure evil, emphasizing the irreversible loss of 2 precious children. Mercy in his eyes was not warranted. Judge Caro commended the jury for dismissing the insanity defense. He highlighted Ortega's calculated planning, especially regarding her suicide attempt, underscoring the chilling premeditation behind the crime. Despite Ortega's claim of memory loss, the judge found her motives remain a dark mystery. Moments later, the sentence was handed down, life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Yoselyn Ortega was condemned to spend the rest of her days behind bars. The courtroom's final act sealed her fate, ensuring she would never again pose a threat. In the aftermath, the Crimm family channeled their grief into a powerful new mission. They launched an initiative named for Lulu and Leo, advocating for laws to criminalize falsified references on caregiver job applications. Their goal was clear: to prevent tragedies like theirs by ensuring caregivers cannot deceive families about their qualifications or history. The Crimms voiced their bitter sense of betrayal, accusing Ortega's family of remaining unaccountable for their part in the murders. They insisted every child deserves an honest, responsible caregiver. No one should be allowed to lie about their background when entrusted with a child's safety. Finding the right words to close this chapter proved almost impossible. The horror that unfolded in that apartment in October 2012 defied even the darkest nightmares. Yet, from this unspeakable tragedy, the Lulu and Leo Fund emerged, a beacon of hope and action. The resilience, dignity, and grace shown by Marina and Kevin Crimm in the face of unimaginable loss stand as a testament to their character. Their strength continues to inspire all who hear their story.